Colonel Linda Lyon retired from the Air Force in 2007 at Andrews Air Force Base. That's the home of Air Force One. She served as the Mission Support Group Commander, which is a small city manager, for over 20,000 people in that community and 2,000 people under her command. Post-Air Force retirement, she managed a logistic contract at the Department of Energy and was a deputy program manager for the L3 Communications on Security Border Initiative program. Since moving to Tucson in 2008, she has managed a non-for-profit, supports a variety of charities, including founding the Oral School Foundation and working on multiple participality campaigns. Linda is now in her 11th year of service as a member of the Oral School District Governing Board and is the current board president. She is also past president of Arizona School Boards. Linda is married to Air Force Colonel retired Holly Lyon also. So we would like to welcome, please, Colonel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for those kind words, and thank you to all of you for coming out today and thinking I'm worth listening to. I hope that's the case. My wife, Holly Lyon, I brought her along in case you ask any really hard questions, and I'm going to defer to her. Holly was the number 3 in the Arizona Democratic Party. She was the Pinal County chair. She was the chair of the Saddlebrook Dem several times, and what else? She's still very active with LD17 and Pinal County, so she's doing a lot of good work there, so thanks for coming. Okay, so I call this the state of the future of the state because our kids are the future of the state, right? So what's happening in K-12 education in America? This is the answer to the number 1 question I get asked all the time. Yes, they know exactly what they're doing. What's the question? What's wrong with Republicans? Don't they know what they're doing? As soon as you figure out that answer, you know much of what you need to know, and it all makes sense. It doesn't make sense if you think that they are trying to do the right thing by our kids, because you know they're not doing that. So if you just upfront say, okay, I understand, they know exactly what they're doing, they have a plan, and that plan is not to strengthen public education. Okay? So we'll come back around to that later on. Okay, so Arizona, there's an organization that runs an Arizona Education Progress Meter. It's the Center for the Future of Arizona. And it tracks progress in a variety of areas. 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, high school graduation, etc. And the Future of Arizona tracks a variety of areas, and the trend is downward in 6 of 7 of those areas in Arizona. Since 2019, it's down 7% in early learning and post-high school enrollment, 9% in 3rd grade math, and 14% in 8th grade math. But when you look at the national trends on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, we're holding our own. So that's the good news. We may be sliding a little in Arizona, but no, I mean, we're doing okay. We're right there in the middle. Now, a lot of people would say this NAEP is not an accurate way to, how many teachers in the crowd? Okay, you guys know, thank you for your service, first off. Secondly, you guys know that the NAEP is a false reflection of how our kids are really learning. But it is the test that is used, so it's what we get measured against. So we're doing okay on the NAEP. Next. But our teachers are tired. You've read the stories about how short of teachers we are. And you know, the funny thing is, we're not short of people who are qualified to be teachers. We're short of people who want to be teachers, right? We're short of people who want to suffer through this year after year after year. And a lot of them have left the classroom. They're in Arizona. They're just doing other stuff. So we had over 9,600 teaching positions open for the 2022-23 school year. And I think this was by like September or something, that many positions were still unfilled. And 4,000 teaching positions were filled with alternate teacher requirements. In other words, they relaxed the standard. And 813 were filled by long-term subs. And you know how kids react to substitute teachers, right? Oh, and I don't know if you noticed, but teacher pay still hovers around 48th in the nation. So don't believe that oh, we've made it all good. The Republicans made it all good with their 20 by 20 2020 thing. Okay, our facilities and support, our facilities are tired too, and there's a general lack of support. Insufficient funding for infrastructure. There's still a lawsuit pending to have $4.5 billion returned to the school because nothing was put into capital for years and years and years. And so, and you know what happens when you kick that can down the road on infrastructure? It just costs more and more and more. So it's not helping taxpayers any to defer that bill. We don't have the wraparound services for students and families we should have, especially during a time of lower economic boon or during COVID when families really need the help. It's just not there. And the counselor to student ratio is still the highest in the nation. The recommended by the Counselors Association is like 250 students per counselor, and we have like 800. So, and even if you have the money, there has been funding recently to either have, you probably read about it, either have a counselor, there's been grant funding from the state, to get either a counselor, actually I think it came from the feds to begin with, either a counselor or a SRO, a schools resource officer, a cop. But even if you have the funding for a counselor, which our school had, we couldn't find one because they're in such high demand. So, I talked about this. Overall, funding has not increased. No matter what talking points the Republicans use, it's all sleight of hand. When you take away and take away and take away, and then you give back, and you give back a little, you can claim, oh, we gave it. Look how we funded the school. Yeah, but you took all this away to begin with. So what you gave back isn't even what you took away. So that's what happened here. Inflation-adjusted K-12 funding per public school student shows it has not really increased in 21 years. You can see in 2001, it was $8,800 per student. In 2019, almost $8,900. And in 2020, it was back down to $8,700. So this is how much more we've gotten in funding over 2 decades. And actually, the 2022 figure reflected a cut of $1,412 per student over that time. So we are not better off than we were. Go ahead. Okay, so you heard back, was it Grover Norquist under Reagan who talked about, we just need to drown government in the bathtub, right? Shrink government to the size that we can drown it in the bathtub. That was their whole plan back then. It's still the whole plan. And so public education is one of the biggest expenditures of government, no matter where you are. And so this is drowning public ed in the bathtub. So one of the ways they do that is student tuition organizations, or STOs. And these allow taxpayers to give 6 times as much in tax credits to private schools versus district schools. So you can give $200 per person per taxpayer, or $400 per couple, which to me is just $200 per person times 2. But anyway, I don't know why they always put it that way. I mean, it's $200 per person to your public school. And used to, you had to give it by December 31st. Then at least they allowed us to extend it to April 15th to tax day, just like it is for private schools. But still, that money can only be used for extracurricular activities. Private schools can use it for whatever they want. And they don't have to report anything about how they use it. Your tax dollars, they don't have to report anything about how they use it. There are also 2 different kinds of student tuition organization donations for corporations. And they're up to like $141 million a year that corporations don't pay in taxes. They get a tax credit. They pay in a tax credit. And this cap, 141, is reached in like a matter of hours. And then corporations can roll this over every year. So it keeps them from having to pay taxes. District school tax credits, as I said, can only be used for extracurricular activities. Okay, but the number 1 problem is vouchers, formerly known as empowerment scholarship accounts. They started in 2011, and they've expanded almost every year since. In 2018, Save Our Schools, you remember Save Our Schools Arizona, awesome organization. They managed to get on the ballot an initiative to have us vote on whether or not we should have a full expansion of vouchers. The voters, 2-1, the voters said no. But the legislature, of course, they listened and they said, okay, we got it. No more vouchers, right? No, that would be wrong. They said, we don't care what the voters said, we're going to hit it again. So in 2022, 4 years later, they came back and deaf ears to the voters. They said, we're going to go for a full expansion again. And Save Our Schools Arizona again launched an effort to block that, but they had a technical issue that a judge threw out their petitions, and so here we are with universal vouchers throughout Arizona, first in the nation, and now there are 11 states with ESAs, or vouchers. So the universal vouchers went into effect in 2022, and proponents have always argued there would be no harm to public schools since education dollars would follow the child. Surprise, surprise, surprise. That's not what happened, because there are always fixed costs that stay behind. If you got one kid leaves now to go to this, to be homeschooled, one kid leaves now to do this, one kid leaves now to do that, you still have to turn on the lights in the classroom, even though 3 kids left. You still have to run the same bus route. You still have to have the same number of teachers. You still have to run the air conditioning. So you still have to have a superintendent for, X number of students. So there just are fixed costs that stay behind, and what I've read before is like 19% of the costs that are fixed costs that will remain no matter what. They also claim that it's just a wash because the kid leaves and the funding follows the kid, and so it's just a complete wash. What are you complaining about? Well, the truth is that would be the case if all the kids who took vouchers came from the public schools, left the public schools and went to the private schools. But that has not been the case. I'll talk about that in a minute. And vouchers now cost $424 more for elementary and middle school students and $540 more for high schoolers. One of their assertions has been, well, vouchers are going to be cheaper because they're at like 90%. But that is not the case anymore. Next slide. So when the universal vouchers went into effect, 30,000 parents applied right away to get vouchers for their kids, just in the first 2 months. And so the voucher program hit a 210 hit to the state fund. $210 million hit to the state fund. The Joint Legislative Budget Committee, usually commonly known as the JLBC, had predicted $33 million. So right off the bat, in the first 2 months, we went to $210 million. And now for the next school year, we're looking at $900 million. And based on the number of kids, schools we have in the state, is 300,000 per school. Of course, it depends on the size of the school, but we're at almost $1 billion this voucher program is going to cost us. It's not going to save us money. There's been talk at times about how it's like the alt fuels scheme. Does anybody remember that? How they had this great idea, we're going to run this alt fuels thing and it'll save the state money, but they eventually had to scrap it, right? And what's going to happen here is, I predict, is it's going to continue until they just cannot stand the heat anymore, and by then they will have destroyed public schools to a large degree, and then we'll have to work to rebuild them at God knows what the cost there will be. It's really horrific. So the problem is, remember I talked to you about how it would be okay, well, it would be more okay if the kids leaving or kids taking the vouchers had come from the public schools. Because then at least you could say, well, we're not spending any more money on them in the public school. 80% of the kids that have taken the vouchers so far were already at private schools. So all the taxpayers are doing is offsetting the cost of a private school education for the kids whose parents could afford to pay for it. It's Republicans don't like to talk about redistribution of wealth. Oh my God! It's a massive redistribution of wealth. The only problem is it's going the wrong way, right? So these students represent an entirely new cost to taxpayers. Okay, this wasn't a cost we were paying for before. The parents were paying for it themselves, and now we're having to suck it up. Go ahead. And for those who claim parents should get to use their tax dollars however they see fit, they are not their tax dollars. They're our tax dollars. And as I say, their right to send their child where they want, and sorry for the use of this word, does not trump my right to know how my dollars are being spent, right? I mean, as a taxpayer, I'm entitled to know how my tax dollars are being spent. In other words, the bang for the transparency for taxpayers. They don't have to report on how the kids tested. They don't have to report on how the money's used. They don't have to report at all. Homeschoolers don't have to do a dang thing. To homeschool your child in Arizona, you need only send a letter, I think, to your county school superintendent that says, I'm going to homeschool. That is the only thing you have to do. The state no longer cares what, anything about it. But that's okay. We know that parents are all good to go as far as being teachers. Okay, next. Okay, so I was asked to speak about the aggregate expenditure limit, or AEL. Just think debt ceiling limit. We just went through that, right, at the federal level? It's basically the same thing, but it's just having to do with schools. I just thought of Paul for a second. I've been moving around way too much, haven't I?
That's good right there.
Okay. So the aggregate expenditure limit, or AEL, was a constitutional amendment passed by voters in 1980, and it created a spending limitation for school districts in the aggregate, in the whole. It's calculated every year on fiscal year 1980 spending with adjustments. And the limit was reached early, or in such a great amount, because COVID-driven enrollment declines last year, inflation, restoration of funding cuts, all those things that are listed there. I say the A in AEL should be for antiquated, as it's now 43 years old. This provision is 43 years old. It limits student opportunities, it limits pay growth for teachers, and growth for technology in the classroom. Just think about how much a computer costs compared to a pencil. 43 years ago, we were using pencils. And maybe calculators. I think calculators, it wasn't the slide rule 43 years ago, but, not far away from that. Now we want every kid to have a Chromebook. In 2023, the failure to raise the limit would have forced districts to cut 17% from their budgets. And the Oracle School District, we have about 400 kids, and that would have equaled $1 million. A $1 million cut for us, about a fifth of our budget, which would have been very, very painful, and really just very false limits set, by the legislature.
Only 400 kids in the Oracle?
Yeah. Oracle School District, yes. I've been there 11 years, so. Yeah. Do you have a question about that?
No.
Okay. So several bills have been raised this year, and I'm sure in previous years, to do away with the AEL, but so far, no progress on that. So what can you do? Contact your legislators, and whenever you're talking about education in Arizona, or really anywhere, I think the important focus for Democrats is to talk about accountability for taxpayer dollars. If you're talking to, your fellow rabid Democrat, you can talk in whatever terms you want. But if it's anybody who's maybe a little bit more center or right, just talk about accountability, because we all should want that, right? And transparency for the use of taxpayer dollars. Hopefully you all know about Request to Speak, how you can speak to the legislature either in person or online about bills they are considering. I told you I really think highly of SOS-AZ, great organization. Hopefully you know your school board members, and even though you don't have kids in the district, maybe you drop them a line if you're upset about something, and make your tax credit contributions to your district school. Okay? So, make no mistake, the war on public education is a systematic, concerted effort to redirect $500+ billion in the United States from public funding to private funding, because if it's private funding, guess what happens? People make money off of it. And eliminate local control and public voice, not only in education, but in our democracy at large. The ability of voters or the public to have a voice in their public schools is like the most fundamental exercise of our right to speech, our right to be involved, our right to exercise our rights in our democracy. And if they can get rid of that capability for us, what a win. What a win. Yeah. I mean, you can go to any school board meeting anytime. It's open meeting law. You can go there and you can speak at the beginning of any school board meeting. You don't even have to talk about something on the agenda. But you can just speak and let your voice be heard. And there's not a lot of places you can do that easily. And so if they do away with this, just think about where it leads us. Whether by design or default, these actions are destined to ensure an oligarchy. And privatizing public education, again, just increases the wealth divide. It serves those who have versus those who have not. Eventually, all that's going to be left in public schools are those kids who have no other option. Because the vouchers don't even pay enough to send your kid to private school. In most cases, it's not enough money to do that on your own. You have to provide the transportation to get your kids there. So if you don't have that, if you're a mom who works at Circle K and cleans houses, you're a single mom, and you don't have a car, or at least not one that can drive down to, whatever private school. And oh, by the way, private schools have the choice. That's where the choice is. It's not with the parents, because a private school doesn't have to tell you diddly about why they didn't want your kid there. All they have to say is no, you're not accepted. So your taxpayer dollars are going to schools that don't have to accept everyone. Like will continue to weaken our democracy as it solidifies power and influence for those at the very top. I don't tend to be a conspiracy theorist, but I do think this is all part of a larger concerted effort to get rid of our democracy, to take away the power of the people. And to me, school boards are just a great way for people to be involved. Not school boards, but public schools, through school boards. If you've never considered running for the school board, it's a pretty good gig. And you know what? At the local level is where stuff happens. Everybody gets focused on the president or the Senate or the Congress or the state legislature. But do you know what water board positions are open, or fire board positions, or school board positions? That's the decisions made at those meetings affect your lives more in most cases than some of these decisions. Well, what decisions? What decisions are made at the national level? They're too busy fighting cultural wars. So I leave that with you. If you've ever thought about it, think a little bit harder. It's a very worthwhile endeavor and very satisfying to do. So, are there any questions?
Do you have any comments about the Tom Horn who was elected state superintendent?
Well, yeah, I like to say no matter what, we all did. No matter what, we all did, because I've done a lot. Holly has run for, she's been a candidate for State House twice, and we also supported 2 other Senate campaigns. And so I've worked very hard politically since we've been in the state. But even I haven't done everything I should have done. If we haven't, each of us, done everything that we could possibly do to get the right people elected, then we kind of all did, So it was amazing. I think what I've read, or what I understand, is that Kathy Hoffman just didn't spend the time campaigning. And she probably didn't take, him seriously, just like a lot of us didn't take Trump seriously, And in fact, if you look at them, there's anyway.
We try not to.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't think he got elected on charm and charisma and good looks. But anyway, so that's it. And he's continuing in the same vein that he was before, unfortunately. And isn't it sad to see things then fall apart, get torn apart after we've made progress? It's so inefficient. Drives you crazy. Yes, ma'am.
I have one observation and one question. Your comment about the charter schools, private schools, whatever you call them, the non-public schools not having to do any reporting. In addition to that, they are not obligated to provide support for students with special needs. So all of those students are then relegated to the public schools because the public schools are obligated to provide those services.
Yes.
And there's that greater drain on what public schools can offer across the board. That's just one observation. Question I have is about homeschooling. I've heard conflicting reports on how viable that is, how effective homeschooling is. In some cases, they're saying it's very minimal, and students only get the absolute minimum. Others are saying, no, they're really quite effective. They pass the major testing, the PSATs, get to college, et cetera, et cetera. So I was wondering if you could provide us some input on your awareness or effectiveness of homeschooling here, at least in Arizona. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't know. First, your comment about the special needs, spot on. My school district has, the state average is like 13% of your students are special needs. In my district, it's like 20. It hovers between 20 and 22. And we do get some weighted, we get some little additional funding for special needs, but it's not enough to cover the costs. Some special needs students are incredibly expensive. I mean, it can approach $100,000 a year, depending on the severity of the students. And of course, you want those students to get what they need, but it does when the funding is not provided, when the funding is not sufficient, the funding that is used comes off the backs of the other students. So that's kind of sad. And although charter schools are public schools and are required to accept special needs students, all students, we have had instances where like a family of 3 will go into, let's say, BASIS, okay? And 2 of the students are, superstars, and BASIS is like, yeah, come on in. And the 3rd student special needs, and maybe they'll tell the parents, well, that's just not our specialty. We just are not that good at that. But Oracle, oh my God, they are fabulous in Oracle. I mean, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but it does happen like that. So with regard to the homeschooling, I don't know any statistics. I can really only go on my own observation. And I think where parents have the education to provide a good, and the temperament and the financial means to provide a good schooling at home, I think the kids do great. I can think of Natalie, I mean, she's just fabulous. But I think there's also a lot of families that don't have all that. And, you've seen the abuses of, that have been reported about stuff that parents buy, for their kids. I mean, there's trampoline classes, and there's large screen TVs, and whatever. And I read something like, I want to say like 50,000 requests for vouchers were approved in one day. Okay, and that happens in the homeschooling environment too. For the vouchers that they have. Well, the vouchers for the receipts that they have to turn in to get their voucher money. There's just not enough people to review those. So yeah, there's abuses going on. And, they would like to say, well, there's not enough accountability in public school. Oh my God, you should see what I have to go through almost every day in signing things, as a school board member. And you can request all that information from the school district. There's almost nothing you can't get if you do a FOIA request. So it's amazing to me how the Republicans have been so adept at making black look white, up look down. I mean, it's just, they're masters.
Katie Hoff just vetoed Bill 1243 because she said it would cost the state $271 million just last year.
So I've got 2 questions.
Sure.
I don't know if you know this. I think maybe it came out today. The opioid settlement. Arizona is getting something like $300 million for the opioid settlement. Proposition 301 many years ago was the settlement from the cigarettes. I'm wondering if you know anything, if the opioid funds is going to go to schools like the cigarettes. That's my first question. The second question is, there seems to be a double-edged sword when it comes to bonds. When a school district asks for an override bond, sometimes it doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. They come back, the voters will come back and say, you can't manage or you can't budget your money, so therefore you are asking for an override. I'm going to vote no. You need to manage your money better. I've heard this over and over for both Republicans and Democrats doing that. So my suggestion is, dovetailing off of yours, go to a school board meeting and question the superintendent and question their budget practices if that's what that's what the issue is. Do you agree or disagree?
Well, first on the opioid, I don't know of any initiative. I know public education is one of Governor Hobbs's priorities, so, but there's a lot of priorities. So I don't know about that one, but that would be worth watching. Because 301 was very helpful to improving quality in our schools, especially with the quality of teaching. With regard to the overrides and bonds, when I was at the Arizona School Board Association, we were always trying to change the verbiage, the official verbiage that was used. And we didn't want override or override continuation, because override makes it sound like we could not manage our money. And, oh, by the way, again, not a conspiracy theorist, but I don't think that was by accident, okay? What the override actually is it is a supplement to basic funding. So the state gives every student, the state gives schools for every student a basic amount of funding. Let's call it $5,000. That's close enough, okay? So every student in the state is worth $5,000 to every school that has that student, okay? That money isn't intended, oh, they might like for it to be able to fund for everything, but it is not enough to fund for everything that all of us think should be provided to students. For example, with $5,000, you maybe wouldn't have music, art, physical education. You wouldn't have moderate class sizes. You wouldn't have competitive salaries for teachers. Okay, and I specifically know about those things because we are going through an override continuation again in my school district, and that's the things that we use our money for, our override money. All an override means is it is a it's locally supported funding that supplements the basic budget. Has nothing to do with how you manage your money. Nothing. It's just like, you know, Dad gives you an allowance, and Mom gets you a little extra every week because she knows Dad's a cheapskate. That's all it is. And for the bonds are usually for capital items. Like we, in 2019, we got a bond approved for $13.2 million. And we have focused very hard on making sure that the voters knew what they were voting for, and that we are delivering exactly what they voted for. You know, not more, not less, but what we told them we were going to do. Just like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm always impressed when, is it RTS that posts the signs that says, your road delivered as promised, early, you know, or on time, and you go, yeah, good, okay, you know, government's working. So that's what a bond is for, is generally to upgrade facilities, build new schools. Does that answer? Okay, good. Sure.
I worked in Illinois in public schools for 14 years, low-income area, very wealthy area. I worked in Arizona for 6 years. As far as the homeschooling, one of the things I noticed in Illinois is that enrichment had a lot to do with a child's success, and those of lower incomes were not able to supply the enrichment. I think that maybe instead of just looking at those who are homeschooled and what they achieve, compare that to how much the family income is. Because we both know that the amount of money they're getting for homeschooling is not enough to give them a complete and full education. And I would think you would see that the ones that are going on to college are probably the ones with families with a lot more money.
Sure.
So looking at those two things, rather than just who succeeded and who's not, you find out why they're not succeeding as well.
Great point, and that's the same thing in our schools. That's the same. You know, the parents during COVID, it was really, really, really tough on most kids. Okay, staying home. There were some kids who did better. There were some kids who didn't like the school environment, who were bullied, who whatever. They didn't like that. They loved being home, and they did better. The kids that did fine, that stayed on the even track, were whose parents could help them. Right? Not the kids whose, you know, parents were working full time and didn't have time to spend with them. Not that they didn't want to, but they didn't have time. So it is always the case. Those that have can get more, you know, and those that don't sometimes fall behind.
When I moved here from Colorado, I was totally shocked because Colorado has their own separate budget and income for their education. And so all the marijuana and some of the off-track betting goes to their education field directly. So they know exactly each year how much money is coming in, and they are responsible for that. I was shocked when I got here, and people in my neighborhood said, "I'm not paying school tax, yay!" And I'm thinking, yes, but you need to be, because of the quality of the people that you're educating in the area.
There's a Sun City up by Phoenix that when they built the Sun City, they negotiated a deal with the city or the county, whatever, to not pay school taxes. And good for them, you know, I hope they're proud of themselves. They're obviously not invested in their community. The point about homeschooling, though, again, I wanted to say that Arizona is one of the few states that at least provides equalization funding. And what I mean by that, and I don't know, it's one of the few states, but not every state does this. Arizona at least does. So you have your basic $5,000, and some places that cannot do the locally supported funding, you know, the voters just will not approve it. They don't have the means to approve it or sufficient funding. The state provides funding to them to help make it more even. And each school district can only go for so much in override funding. They are capped as to what they can seek. So that aims to keep it a little more equal. But I can guarantee you that the Foothills School District gets more funding, override funding, than San Manuel. You know, I mean, it just works like that. There is some equalization that's going on, but it's not fair. Yes?
Emphasize the importance of running for school board. Is there a template? Is there an organization where, if someone were to do that, decide to do that, where could they get support? Because we know the Republicans are organized around doing that. Is there anything for Democrats or independents?
Good question. And the place you start is with your county schools office. Okay, you guys are in Pima County, right? So your Pima County Schools office, go to their website, and you can look at elections and school board elections. They'll give you the requirements. They'll have a complete packet with a checklist of here's the things that I have to do to run for school board. And every 2 years, there's some school board member that's coming up for election in your school district. Generally, there's two the first year, and then there's 3 running the next year. So that's how you do that. As far as funding to help support you, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the Republicans in Pinal County ran some funny business. They had the parties. Holly, explain it real quick for me.
The Republican Party of Pinal County actually gave money to fund different school board elections. And that's against the law because parties are not allowed to contribute to nonpartisan races. So now the Democratic Party in Pinal County basically called this to the attention of the state, and the state came down and said, "What are you going to do about it, Republicans?" And they said, "We'll ask for the money back."
So George can give you some money, but don't be asking the Democratic Party for money. That won't happen. But you can fundraise.
There was a big battle. I'll get to you next, Ellen. There was a big battle of the Catalina School District, and the Republicans went in there and just raised hell to the point that they had to close down the meeting.
Yeah.
The following week, LD18 went in there and just raised hell with the school board for that, allowing that to happen. So there are some things going on from the Democrats that are out.
Well, my focus as the president of my school board this year has been to be non-controversial. Because I'm not going to roll over and play dead, but controversy doesn't help the kids. You teachers know that, right? You got to keep things on the straight and narrow.
In 1980, which might be before you came, the Arizona voters approved the creation of the Arizona Lottery. Is this ringing a bell for you?
Well, I know about the Arizona Lottery, yes.
And it was by a narrow margin, but the original, the proceeds were to pay for law enforcement, health services, education, and other vital programs. And only 30% of it was supposed to go into the general fund until, I do not remember what year that was. There was a crash that year. And the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, decided all of it was to go into the general fund. And I don't know if they've ever been able to go back in to the lottery to get money for education again.
I don't know. I mean, that's a very interesting point you make. I guess I don't care if the lottery money comes. I don't care where it comes from. Just give me the money. Show me the money. You know. I mean, I don't care if it comes from the lottery, if it comes from the general fund, but it's not partitioned off. And I think that's kind of your point. It's not safe and secure into education. But as taxpayers, we just need to say, you know, we're concerned about the future of our state, and even more so, not more so, and we're concerned about what's happening to our taxpayer dollars. Where's our taxes going? Where's the accountability on these things? You know.
Well, I just want to add something to that. Colorado has decided all the money from the marijuana goes to schools. Out at Deer Trail, which is a very poor city in eastern plains of Colorado, they took a 100-year-old school and built a brand new one that had not been done. So it's incredible the amount of money the district.
Hold on a second. Colorado has a cap. It has a cap on how much money that they put on. That they
recently, because it originally wasn't set up.
They have a cap. They have a cap for the marijuana sales, and as soon as that money hits that cap, the money is then refunded to the population of Colorado.
That's right.
So they don't get all the money.
Okay. Anymore. Okay. Good point.
I want to also mention that we talk about funding for education. The former governor, past governor, has been bragging for 4 years about his $1 billion surplus. So there is money to fund education. It's just not being done. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. There is plenty of money to fund education.
What kind of education?
Private education.
I know.
The interesting thing is about that $1 billion that's sitting out there is some of that money had been earmarked specifically for education, and it's been through the courts, and the court in Arizona told Lucy he had to release that money, and he flatly refused to do it. Why that man's butt isn't in jail is beyond me. But the other thing that hasn't been mentioned, is rarely mentioned in any of this discussion about supporting education, is there's no real number, because it's never been calculated, as to how much money individual teachers spend for classroom supplies, for which they are never reimbursed.
You want to see my budget?
I think that's a point that's missing, because people don't understand that teachers are taking money out of their own pockets to support education. They're going to come down on teachers for everything from, I don't like the hat he wears when he comes in the door, I don't like the kind of shoes he wears, I don't like what he says when he's teaching math. I mean, all kinds of belonging. They never understand that that teacher then leaves, and that weekend is going and spending sometimes a couple $100 to provide supplies for the following week for their students. I just wanted to make that observation.
You know, I think the people who care do know, and the people who don't care don't care. The people who don't know don't care. Okay, anything else?
You like the color orange?
Yes.
There is a federal law, the Kinuvento, that's for homeless kids. And I know that it is, you know, public schools can get money for that, for the students. I don't know if private schools can or charter schools. I don't know the answer to that. What I would encourage our public schools to do, though, is if a child is homeless, and there's a lot of different ways that you can be homeless. Situational, I mean, you can truly be homeless, it could be a fire, whatever the way, but they're homeless. If it's like at the beginning of the year, then they get the funding for the entire school year. But I don't know about charter schools or private schools if they can apply for McKinney-Vento funds as well.
I'm going to guess that we are availing ourselves of that because I've heard about that. If charter schools are public schools,
Right.
so they should be able to get that. I'm going to guess that there aren't any homeless in private schools. Or if they are, they're pretty few and far between, and maybe they're short-lived. But it's a good point. We in the Oracle School District, we hired a grant writer. She does a lot of things, but grant writing is one of the things she does. And the school board was a little hesitant at first because it was another administrative cost, and everybody's always looking at administrative versus what's in the classroom. But she has more than paid for herself in grants. We've gotten $600,000 out of the School Facilities Board in the last 3 years, and people talk about how hard that is to get anything out of them. So I think most school districts, if they have anything on the ball, they're going after the grants that they can get, hopefully, and thank you for that. That's a great point.
Well, private schools could get it, but it would be situational.
Right.
It would be like their houses burned.
Well, the Republicans have not just sat on their hands to not fund schools. They were really out very busy this year. Out of the 110 bills that Katie Hobbs vetoed, 10 of them I wrote down were just about schools. Everything from more guns in school, critical race theory, books, even student vaccinations. They wanted to stop that. So they are very busy. So if you need more information on how to run for a school board, Lois, Mike is the guy to go to, right? Mike ran last year, so has a lot of insight on what to do and how to do it. So thanks, Mike, once again for doing that. We do appreciate it.
Thank you so very much for
Let's
having me.
thank Governor Ducey put together a ESP program, sought to pay for full-time kindergartens. What has happened to the American Rescue Plan that is now, the COVID-19 Recovery Act is not funding those kindergarten programs any longer?
Governor Ducey's expansion of the ESA program for kindergartners was an illegal use of the federal funding because it was going to private schools. And federal funding hasn't been used in that way before, and that's what the problem was. It wasn't that Governor Ducey was recommending paying for full-day kindergarten in all our schools. He was wanting to use the money for the ESA voucher program. That was the problem. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. It was so very great to speak with all of you today. Thank you so much for having me, and I wish you the very best in the coming year.